Good afternoon, it's Michael again, and today's video is based on your requests. I have received numerous requests from Latin American students and Europeans to explain the skilled migration process to Australia. The reason is because there's a lot of information out there in social media, in other people who try to, I guess, explain it in a complex way which doesn't make sense, or which would a person not be able to understand. So I'll try to use a simplified version so you can understand it, or anybody can understand it. Australia has a controlled migration intake per year. So the government sets a number of visas, permanent visas, which will be available for allocation for 12 months period. The current financial year, which started 1st of July 2022 and will finish 30th of June 2023, had an allocation 160,000. I said had because recently the department increased the number by 35,000. So the total number of allocation for permanent visas is 195,000. We're not certain at this stage the distribution of the additional 35,000 people, whether it's going to be family visas or sponsorship or state or territory nominations. So what I'll be talking about today is what we know as a fact today, and once the department allocates those 35,000, we can make additional video. So these 160,000 visas per year, right, or 195, which is coming, is divided across all different visa subclasses. Today, we'll focus on a skilled migration program, and specifically the most common categories, excluding global talent, distinguished talent, significant investors, because those are people with unique circumstances, PhD professors with international recognition, top athletes, or people with millions of dollars who are willing to establish a business in Australia. That's not majority, right? So I would say it's a minority, but those are part of the 160,000 allocation. So we're going to look at today the two main skilled migration pathways. One of them is a state or territory nomination. What does it mean? That means that a state of New South Wales, Queensland, or Western Australia will invite certain people for a skilled migration, right? Those invitations are, the numbers of those invitations given to those states and territories are very limited comparing to the number of people who are applying for it, right? I'll go into details shortly. The second migration pathway is employer-sponsored visa. That's pretty much in your control, because employer-sponsored visa is decided between two people. You, the employee, with certain skills and abilities, and the employer who either likes you or doesn't like you, not necessarily personally, but skills-wise. So let's look at the first category of the state or territory nominated visa. There are three subclasses which falls under that category: 189, 190, and 491. The 189 subclass is based on an occupation from so-called medium and long-term skills occupations list, so-called MLTSSL. If you have an occupation from one of those lists, from this particular list, not my apologies, from this particular list, for example, engineer, IT specialist, a carpenter, or a nurse or a teacher, you can, once you meet the basic requirements, join the hundreds of thousands of other people with similar skills and age and English and experience as you. You can put a hand up and ask or apply through the skills select and expression of interest system for a permanent visa. We need to understand that skilled independent 189 subclass has a limitation of 16,652 spots per year for all the occupations together across the whole country to more better subclasses which help the country economically and industry growth and fulfilling the skill shortages. Mostly the employer-sponsored stream. Second option is the subclass 190, and I put that together with a subclass 491 because they're kind of similar in a way. Both of those subclasses are based on state or territory nomination. So for example, if you are in Adelaide and you meet certain requirements, you can put a hand up and join the hundreds of thousands of others who are or may potentially be in your state or territory for the subclass 190491. What we need to understand that any of those subclasses require skills assessment. What does it mean? That means that your skills have been assessed by the appropriate skills assessment authority. Why is that important and why do I mention that? Because when you look at certain states and territory requirements, they may say no work experience required, which is true. However, I did mention we need skills assessment. That's a mandatory requirement. And based on your occupation, the appropriate skills assessment authority may require employment. So for example, VETSS, which is one of these skills assessment authorities, require usually 1 year to 2 years depending on the occupation and your academic background. So if the states say no experience required in your occupation, it doesn't mean that you can't have one, because the skills assessment authorities will require it, right? Trades Recognition Australia, for example, and there are two ways to obtain skills assessment, is either through Job Ready program, which takes about 1.5 years to complete. So only after 1.5 years, you will obtain the skills assessment. Or second option is that you have 3 years employment, full-time employment, after completed qualification. That's for different occupations under the same Trades Recognition Australia Assessment Authority. So before we start celebrating the fact that some states and territories do not require any work experience in your occupation to be part of the nomination process, or putting a hand up, we always have to step back and say, well, hang on a minute, I need a skills assessment. What do I need for that? I'd like to stop here and give you an example of a client I talked to yesterday. She was advised to go and study 2-year program in Adelaide called ending with a Diploma of Community Services. The reason is because on a skills occupation list, there is an occupation community worker. As I mentioned, we need skills assessment for any chances of being part of the pool out of which the government will pick individual people for skilled migration. The community worker occupation is assessed by ACWA. ACWA accredits certain education providers and schools in Australia for this particular occupation. South Australia currently does not have any college, any diploma level available as an accredited course. So this particular student who completes this course in Adelaide, the only way she can obtain skills assessment is a 1-year full-time employment as a community worker to be eligible for skills assessment, right? But how is a student who completed diploma level in Australia, how is she going to have access to full-time work rights? Well, it wouldn't, because the diploma levels do not meet the requirements for the graduate visa 485. And I should point out, at this particular financial year, due to the significant shortage of skilled labor, the government made a concession and for 12 months allowed diploma level qualifications to be part of the 485 graduate visa program. But under normal circumstances, so pre-July 1, 2022 and post-July 1, 2023, we will go back to the standard graduate visa for trades or universities only. 99%. There are some exceptions, but let's talk general. So this particular student who completes in 2 years' time her diploma of community services would then have to apply for another student visa for another 2 years, work part-time as a community worker to gain that 1 year full-time experience which is required by ACWA because her school is not recognized for this particular occupation. So 4 years after starting the school, she will finally meet the skills assessment criteria and will be eligible to join the hundreds of thousands of people to ask for a nomination into South Australia under either 190, which is a state nomination, or 491, which is the regional nomination. By putting a hand up, there's no bridging visa, because no one can apply unless they've been invited. So obtaining skills assessment does not mean that you can apply for visa or permanent visa to Australia. You cannot. The only thing you can do is to express an interest and join the crowds. So when we look at this particular case of South Australia, I'd like to tell you exactly what is the total number of visas or the nominations available, invitations rather, available to South Australia for the financial year 2022-2023. So South Australia, and I'm reading it from the government website, subclass 190, 2,700 people. That's how many people can receive an invitation from South Australian government in 12 months period across all of their occupations list. 491, which is the regional, because the whole South Australia is regional, has 3,180. So we do the math and we realize it's a 5,880 spots. So South Australia has available, the government of South Australia has 5,880 nominations or rather invitations available to give away. I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to add additional 1,000 spots for so-called Dharma, which is a designated area of migration. Every designated area has a 500 spots, so I've added it. So we're looking less than 7,000 spots, 600 and 880, right? So we have 600 and 880 invitations available to the South Australian government, right? That's a fact. That's legislated. How many students do you think commenced studies last year alone in South Australia?